She stood at the door, her heart racing, never expecting that the man standing only a few steps away would change her entire life. A powerful millionaire, used to having everything, suddenly froze when he saw the fragile girl who carried secrets he never imagined. What started as a quiet moment at the doorway turned into a storm of emotions, suspense, and a love so deep it could melt even the coldest heart. This is not just a story about romance. It's about fate, second chances, and the power of love to break every wall. Beckham Timothy had everything men claim to dream of. Skyscrapers that touched the clouds, cars that purred like predators, and a name whispered with awe across the business world. Yet when the boardrooms emptied and the lights of his empire dimmed, he was left with silence. A silence that pressed against his chest like a weight. He had power, but no one to share it with. He had respect, but no hand to hold when the nights grew long. His bed, draped in silk, was colder than winter snow. He would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering why success felt like a cage. The world envied him, but envy did not ease loneliness. Behind his sharp suits and confident stride, Beckham was a prisoner of his own empire. He carried emptiness like a shadow no light could erase. That changed on an evening wrapped in glittering chandeliers and hollow laughter. A charity event where men shook hands like merchants trading power and women sparkled like ornaments. Beckham stood among them, tall, commanding, yet detached. None of the smiles reached his heart. None of the laughter touched his soul. He was about to leave, resigned to another empty night when his gaze fell on her. Nora Morgab. She stood quietly near the corner, her brown hair catching the soft glow of the lights. She was not adorned with diamonds, nor did she push forward to catch a billionaire's attention. Instead, she carried herself with quiet grace, like a song only the heart could hear. Her eyes were gentle, yet behind them lingered something unspoken, a sadness wrapped in silence. It wasn't weakness, it was strength born from struggle. And Beckham, a man who thought he had seen everything, found himself pausing. For years, women had approached him with painted smiles, rehearsed laughter, and eyes that saw only his wealth. But Nora was different. She wasn't chasing him. She wasn't performing. She was simply herself. And in that simplicity, she glowed brighter than all the jewels in the room. Beckham felt something he hadn't felt in years. His chest tightened, not with emptiness, but with longing. A stirring he thought money had stolen from him long ago. His gaze refused to leave her. The room blurred, voices faded, and all he saw was Nora, a woman untouched by greed, carrying an invisible story in her heart. He didn't know her yet. He didn't know her pain, her scars, or her secrets. But in that single moment, Beckham Timothy, the man who had everything, realized he had nothing. Because what he wanted was standing right before him. Not a possession, not a conquest, but a soul. For the first time in years, Beckham's hollow heart stirred to life, and in that fragile heartbeat, his world began to change. Their worlds collided again when fate brought Nora into Beckham's empire, not as a guest at another event, but as the lead designer for one of his most ambitious projects. She walked into his boardroom with rolled-up sketches, confidence in her step, and a quiet determination that silenced the chatter of men twice her age. Beckham, who was used to arrogance in the corporate world, found himself stunned. Nora didn't flaunt. She didn't try to impress. She simply was. And her work spoke louder than any introduction. Day after day, Beckham found reasons to visit the project site, not because it needed him, but because she was there. He would lean against the glass walls, pretending to check progress, but in truth, he watched the way her brow furrowed when she concentrated, the way her lips curved into a smile when an idea clicked. She carried herself like a woman who had built armor around her heart, yet her laughter, rare and unguarded, broke through his walls. It started with stolen glances, a brush of hands as she passed him a pen, conversations that stretched long after meetings had ended. Every word between them hummed with tension, like a secret waiting to be confessed. Weeks later, the inevitable happened. One evening, Nora stayed late at the project site, lost in her designs. Beckham offered her a ride home, his voice casual, though his pulse betrayed him. She hesitated, then agreed. The city lights painted her face as they drove in silence, a silence so charged it was louder than words. When they reached his penthouse, He invited her in for coffee. She should have said no. She wanted to say no, but her heart whispered otherwise. The moment the door closed behind them, everything shifted. It began softly, a lingering gaze, a hesitant touch, a breath caught between them. But the dam of restraint broke quickly. His lips claimed hers with desperation, as if he had been waiting all his life for that single kiss. Her hands trembled against his chest, not from fear, but from the overwhelming rush of feeling. They moved together as though their souls already knew the rhythm. Passion filled the room, but it wasn't just fire, it was vulnerability. For Beckham, it wasn't conquest, it was surrender. For Nora, it wasn't lust, it was trust, fragile and trembling. The walls of the penthouse echoed with sighs that spoke louder than words. I need you. I see you. I'm here. Hours later, the city slept below, but Beckham lay awake, his arm reaching for her. For the first time in years, he felt peace. The emptiness that haunted him was gone, replaced by the warmth of a woman who fit against him like she had always belonged. But then she moved. Nora slipped from his embrace quietly, her bare feet soft against the marble floor. Beckham stirred, his eyes heavy with confusion. "Nora?" he whispered. She didn't answer. Instead, she disappeared into the guest room. A soft click echoed in the silence. The lock. Beckham sat up, his heart hammering. Why would she lock herself away? Had he done something wrong? Was she ashamed of him? Or was there a secret she wasn't ready to share? The man who conquered empires found himself staring at a locked door, powerless. The intimacy of the night, so raw and real, now felt fragile, like glass ready to shatter. Beckham's hand rested on the cold wood of the door. "Nora," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Why are you shutting me out?" But there was no reply. Only silence, thick and heavy, separating them more than walls ever could. Beckham stood outside the guest room door, his heartbeat louder than the ticking clock on the wall. He raised his knuckles and knocked gently, as though afraid that any more force might push her farther away. "Nora," his voice came low, almost pleading. "Are you all right?" Silence stretched, long enough to feel like eternity. Then came her voice, soft, trembling, muffled through the wood. "Please, don't ask questions. I just need to be alone." Her words sank like knives into his chest. Alone? After a night where she had given him every part of herself? Alone, after he had finally felt the cold emptiness of his life melt away? Beckham's palm rested on the door, as if his touch could reach her through the barrier. "Nora," he whispered again. But the silence swallowed his plea. For 35 years, Beckham had lived with control. Control over business deals. Control over people's respect. Control over his own reputation. But tonight, standing outside a locked door, he felt powerless. Completely powerless. Why was she hiding? Was she ashamed of what had happened? Was there another man in her heart? Someone she compared him to? Or was it something darker? Something she refused to let him see? Suspicion and worry twisted inside him, each thought heavier than the last. He tried to push the doubts away, but they clung to him like chains. Every second of silence deepened the ache. He lowered himself against the wall, sitting on the cold marble floor outside her room, his head leaning back, his eyes staring at the ceiling. Never in his life had a locked door felt like such a cruel enemy. He had everything. Keys to cities, control of fortunes, but not the key to the one door that mattered most. Inside, he imagined her curled up, tears staining her pillow. The thought hollowed him. What kind of secret could make her close herself off from him like this? The night dragged slowly, each hour heavier than the last. Beckham tried to rest on the couch, but his body wouldn't allow sleep. Every creak in the silence reminded him that she was only a few steps away, yet impossibly far. He closed his eyes, replaying the night over and over, her lips on his, her laughter breaking through his loneliness. The way she looked at him, not as a billionaire, but as a man. And then her sudden retreat, the lock, the barrier. Beckham clenched his fists. He had tasted something pure, something real. But now it felt fragile, like a dream slipping through his fingers. By dawn, his eyes burned from lack of sleep. The man who could sign deals worth billions could not win the simplest battle, opening the heart of one woman. And as sunlight filtered into the penthouse, Beckham realized this was no ordinary affair. This woman, Nora Morgab, was holding a secret strong enough to keep her heart locked away, even from him, and Beckham knew one thing for certain. He would uncover the truth, no matter the cost. The morning light spilled through the tall glass windows of the penthouse, but Beckham's heart carried the weight of a sleepless night. He stood outside the guest room door, his hand hovering over the handle, debating whether to push it open or let her keep her silence. But the thought of losing her, of not knowing why she had shut him out, gnawed at him until he couldn't bear it anymore. With a soft knock, he whispered, "Nora, please, talk to me." For a moment, he feared she would stay hidden. But the lock clicked, and slowly the door cracked open. Nora stood there, wrapped in a thin sheet, her eyes swollen from a night of tears. She looked fragile, yet in her fragility there was an untold strength, like a rose that had grown through concrete. Beckham stepped inside cautiously, not as a man demanding answers, but as a man ready to listen. "I can't endure this silence," he said softly, his voice trembling despite his usual composure. "Why did you lock me out?" Nora's hands clutched the sheet tighter, her body trembling. "You don't understand." Her voice broke, fragile as glass. "I lock doors because I live in fear." Beckham froze, confusion storming through him. "Fear?" he repeated, his brows furrowing. "Of what, Nora? Of me?" Her eyes filled with tears, shimmering like broken stars. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "Not of you, never of you, but of what life has taught me." Beckham's chest tightened, dread crawling through him as he urged gently, "Tell me, please. I need to know." The words poured out of her, each one heavy with pain she had carried alone. "My stepfamily," she began, her voice shaking. "After my father passed, they sold everything. Every piece of my life, every dream I had. It was all gone." Her lips trembled as she continued. "They treated me like I was nothing. I wasn't a daughter. I wasn't family. I was just a burden they wanted to get rid of. They pushed me into houses where men came and went, treating me like an object instead of a human." Beckham's throat burned, his fists clenching in silent rage as he pictured her suffering. Nora's tears slipped down her cheeks. "For years, I never felt safe. Not in my own home. Not in my own skin. So I started locking doors, because it was the only way to feel like I had control, my only shield, my only defense." Her voice cracked, and she covered her face with trembling hands, ashamed of the scars her past had carved into her soul. Beckham's heart shattered. The woman who had given him the most honest night of his life wasn't running from him. She was still running from the ghosts of her past. She wasn't ashamed of him at all. She was protecting herself from the world that had broken her. He stepped closer, carefully, like approaching a wounded bird. His hand brushed hers away from her face, his thumb tenderly wiping away her tears. "Nora," he whispered, his voice breaking with emotion, "you've been fighting alone for too long." Her eyes searched his, terrified of what he might see, pity, disgust, judgment. But Beckham's gaze held none of those. Only fire, only devotion. "You're not broken," he said firmly. "You're the bravest woman I've ever met." Nora's lips quivered as more tears fell, but this time they weren't from fear. They were from the unfamiliar warmth of being understood. And in that moment, Beckham Timothy, a man who had built an empire of steel and glass, realized that his greatest fight wasn't in boardrooms or business wars. It was here, in this room, fighting for the heart of a woman who had survived storms he could barely imagine. Beckham stood still, his eyes locked on Nora, as if one wrong move might cause her to retreat again. But instead of stepping back, he did the one thing she never expected. He stayed. Slowly, gently, he reached forward and laid his hand over hers. The warmth of his touch sent a shiver through her, not of fear, but of something she hadn't felt in years: safety. His voice was low, steady, carrying a weight that made her heart pause. "You never have to lock another door with me," he whispered. "Your safety is mine now." Nora's breath caught in her throat. For years, she had been her own protector, her own shield. No one had ever spoken words like that to her. No one had ever promised to be her refuge. Her eyes searched his face, desperate to find cracks in his sincerity, but all she saw was truth, pure raw truth. For the first time in years, something inside her chest, something tightly bound by fear, began to unclench. Tears welled in her eyes, not from pain this time, but from relief. Her trembling lips parted. Beckham. I don't know how to be anything but guarded. I don't know how to stop locking doors. His thumb brushed softly across her knuckles. Then let me be the one to hold the keys, he murmured. Every door, every wall, until you know you don't need them anymore. The strength in his words seeped into her heart, chasing away the shadows. And for the first time, she felt the chains of fear loosen, link by link. That morning, she unlocked not just the physical door, but also the one buried deep inside her soul. She let him in, into the places she had kept hidden from the world. Nora spoke of her lonely nights, the tears that soaked her pillow when no one cared to ask if she was all right. She spoke of the weight of betrayal, of being discarded like nothing, of walking through life feeling invisible. Her voice broke as she confessed how she built her strength, piece by fragile piece, teaching herself to stand when no one offered a hand. Beckham listened. Not as a billionaire, not as a man used to fixing problems with money, but as a man whose heart had finally found its purpose. Every word she spoke became a thread, binding him to her, weaving their souls closer. When her voice faltered, he didn't rush to speak. He simply reached for her face, his thumb wiping away her tears, his presence steady and unshakable. His silence wasn't empty. It was full, filled with understanding, with the promise that she would never face those memories alone again. Nora, he said at last, his voice thick with emotion, you are not what happened to you. You are strength. You are light. And I will spend my life proving that to you. Her tears fell freely then, but they were different. Healing tears, cleansing tears. For the first time in years, she wasn't crying alone. She was crying in the arms of a man who saw her scars not as shame, but as proof of her survival. And in Beckham's chest, something shifted too. He, the man who once believed his life was hollow despite all his wealth, had discovered the meaning of love, not in diamonds, not in boardrooms, not in victory, but in the fragile heartbeat of a woman who had finally let him in. Weeks passed, and the mansion that once echoed with silence now pulsed with laughter and life. Nora stood by the tall windows, sunlight spilling across the polished floors like golden ribbons. Her eyes followed the gentle sway of the curtains in the morning breeze, and for the first time in years she felt no urge to close them, no urge to hide. The doors, every single one, were open. No locks, no chains, no barriers, and with that simple truth her chest filled with peace. Beckham moved quietly behind her, his footsteps soft against the marble. His arms slid around her waist, strong yet tender, pulling her against him as if she were the most precious thing he owned. Nora leaned back into his embrace, her smile blooming like sunlight breaking through clouds. "You see?" he whispered against her ear. "No locks, only us." Her heart swelled at his words. She turned slightly to meet his gaze, her eyes shimmering. "I never thought I'd feel safe without a door closed. But now, safety is you." His lips brushed her temple, lingering there, his hold on her unyielding. Beckham Timothy, once a man haunted by emptiness, had found something greater than power. He had found purpose in protecting her heart. He no longer cared about deals or towers of steel. His empire was here, in his arms, in the woman who had unlocked more than just his home. She had unlocked his soul. Together they created a love with no walls, no locks, no fear. And in their union was a message, a truth too powerful to be ignored. Their love became a voice for every broken soul who had ever hidden behind barriers of fear, a whisper to the wounded. Healing begins when someone sees your scars and chooses to love you deeper because of them. Nora had lived in shadows, but Beckham's devotion had drawn her into the light. And Beckham, once hollow despite his billions, had discovered the joy of giving himself fully, of being someone's safe place. The lesson was clear. True love is not about wealth. It is not about status or glamour. It is about presence. It is about safety. It is about building a home not of stone, but of trust and tenderness. As sunlight warmed the room, Nora turned fully in his arms, her hands resting on his chest. Her voice was steady, filled with the strength she had reclaimed. "I don't need locked doors anymore, I have you." Beckham's throat tightened, his eyes glistening with emotions he could no longer hide. "And you," he whispered, pressing his forehead against hers, "have all of me." In that moment, the man who once lived in emptiness was full, overflowing with love, devotion, and peace. And the woman who once lived in fear was free, free to breathe, to dream, to love without chains. Their story became more than romance. It became a promise to the world. It builds a home inside the soul,